Thank you, Mel. Okay. Check. So this presentation reflects on the nature of rules in typography and typesetting, and proposes, perhaps a bit provocatively, that there are no rules in typography, but not in the sense that they don't exist at all, but that their nature is much more closer to conventions than rules in a conventional sense. And I will develop this idea by looking into how we talk about rules, with typography, and how this often conflicts with what the rules are made for. And I will also talk about how designers work, which again is often in conflict with how they think of rules and the typography is. And in the end, I will illustrate this with the clash between rules and practice with two examples that focus on conflict between orthography and typography. And one of these examples is from the design field and another from contemporary poetry. And as a concluding remark, I will talk about what are the implications of these ideas to design in general, and propose that we should redefine the concept of functionality from that perspective. First, we should look into what rules of typography are. And there are several books written about them, but I used Google. And basically, Google is right. These are all important aspects of typography. But I would propose that none of them is a sufficient requirement for making a good design. And by that, I mean design that works in a specific context and with a specific goal in mind. Because the context in which a designer works and the specific goal that they have in mind might change drastically how a certain rule is interpreted. For instance, there are designers who constantly break, consciously or unconsciously, design rules, but still make good design that fulfills their desired goals and is communicated to their audiences. There are designers who follow each rule dogmatically, but their design still lacks a certain formal or communicative aspect. And this shows, in my opinion at least, that the rules of typography are not unequivocal, as for instance the rules of mathematics are. One must understand the rules correctly and follow the calculus step by step in order to reach a valid result. One can even follow these rules blindly, as machines do, while in design, just following a rule is not enough. Although I would like to know, as a side note, that perhaps recent developments in AI one day will make us rethink this situation. And from this, it follows that typographic rules are much closer in nature to social conventions or suggestions of best practices than, so to speak, rules with a certain objective ground. If we reformulate the idea of what the rules of typography is like, if we reformulate the ideas of the rules of typography as conventions, it will have a strong effect on how we behave and how we think about design, how we talk about it, and how we practice it. And I would like to talk first about thinking and talking, and later about practice. For a long time, I have been fascinated by the form that the discussions and most often rants on typography take on social media. It is very common in design and typography communities to post images of mistakes, bad curlings, French hierarchy, or time choice, etc. And I have always been surprised at how confidently these posts are done, and even at the comments and discussions that follow. Sometimes also trollings happen. In the group Estonian Designers, which is the main Facebook group in Estonia for designers, a former student of ours from GD, and he also studied later in the Rab Academy, posted the famous steady logo by Sandra Nuut. And he ranted about the I and J looking so bad and unauthoristic on the logo. And this is clearly a joke, but the likes accumulate very quickly, followed by several suggestions on how it should be current. And actually someone even readjusted the logo in Photoshop, which is clearly time well spent. And all of this was somewhat amusing, but it really made me think that why people fall for these situations, either the sincere ones or trollings. And I think it's exactly the fact that the rules of, the nature of rules is taken too rigidly. It seems that in these situations, people are not seeing the actual design, but only a rule. But in design, I would say that a rule is too narrow of a stencil to see through. And we must always look at the design first, think of what the design is trying to do, and from there on, if necessary, take a look at its relation to rules and conventions. Because the specific design is the context that gives value or devalue to a certain rule, not the other way around. And one would say that why pay attention in these discussions? Because most people who engage in them are non or semi-professionals. They don't know what they're talking about. But actually, quite purposefully, I would like to exclude communities like special communities like in this conference, and focus on non or semi-professionals, as nowadays most design work is actually done by them. And I think this gives us a much more realistic view of how people can do design. And then as a second step, I would like to talk about practice, because I believe that when we are talking about design, we should always keep in mind when designers work, what the practice is actually like. And the reason why the social media debates is so unnatural and strange is that they start from generalizations, which look neat and logical from afar, but they forget to explain how these have realized themselves in practice and how they actually help design to do what it wants to do. And here, I would make use of the relativist philosopher of science called Feyerabend, who describes the application of scientific methods, or in other words, how scientists work, in his seminal book Against Method. And he proposes the notion of anything goes. When it comes to building or defending a scientific theory, scientists tend to use anything that helps them to reach their goals. And of course, this sounds counterintuitive at first, as we are used to thinking of science as a rational process that moves in steady progressing manner, step by step towards the truth. And there are many theories and methodologies to this day that are being taught that repeat this idea. But what Feyerabend does is that he steps away from theory and gets a look at the history of science, and shows that how many scientists have actually worked throughout the ages is completely different. He brings several examples, but his case study is Galileo and his advocacy of the theory that the Earth is rotating on its axis. And Feyerabend very probably shows that Galileo's theory, by the standards of his time, was not rational, and it lacked empirical proof. And also Galileo himself acted non-scientifically. He used propaganda and other arguments to promote his theory to convince people of its validity. And one fun example in the book is that Galileo used anamnesia. It's the idea by Plato that all knowledge is actually remembering. So Galileo tried to convince people by saying that you actually already know that my theory is true because you're only remembering it in some linear. And I would say that something similar happens in graphic design and typography. There are designers often working in the culture field who purposely try to bend the rules. But the daily practice of a visual designer is no different. Even if the end result might pass as correct typographically, the route that the designer went through might be very rough and wrong. And most certainly they will use ad hoc explanations to sell the work to a client or explain to a fellow designer or their boss. And to illustrate how the act of rule breaking functions in typography, I will bring two examples concerning the clash between orthography and typography. Orthography and typography are often trying to do the same thing. They are both structuring and ordering written language in order to make it more legible. In working with language editors as a designer, I have, and I'm sure many of you guys have as well noticed that very often we are arguing over small typographic or orthographic details. For instance, in Estonian orthography, a numbered list should have dots after all numbers. But when it comes to typographic hygiene, I often feel that the dots after the numbers are unnecessary if the numbers are already emphasized by sufficient empty space. Or another thing is M dash. Should it be surrounded by space or not? Spaces or not? And language editors often say yes, while for a designer, it's a typographic choice, depending on the general typography of the book. Another thing is quotation marks. In Estonia, it is orthographically correct to use these quotes, 1966, which to me feel a bit messier than the English quotes. I have often told my students that it's more important to use one style of quotation marks consistently than by any means use the Estonian. So consistency is more important than style. This is more rule. There are several more examples, but the moral of these examples is that designers are constantly breaking the rules of orthography in order to gain typographic hygiene. And this again draws our attentions to the idea that the practice is not about following a rule, but gaining what the rule is supposed to achieve. So essentially, orthography and typography are both trying to develop legibility and understanding, but in several cases, we need to break rules in one context to gain legibility in another. So a second example is from literature, as contemporary poetry also often clashes with orthography. One of the most important elements of making a poem work is the use of rhythm. And to gain rhythms in free verse, poets often use typographic means. The rules of orthography are also tools to structure and rhythmicize language. But when language is too orthographically rigid, it becomes too formal, too functional, too similar to ordinary language. And this is something that was already stated by the Russian formalists like Viktor Shklovsky or Roman Jakobson, who saw that the methods of poetic language is making itself visible, to break away from everyday language, which is automatic, or transparent, like the typography that Beatrice Ward speaks in her Krista Goblet. So basically what the poets do is that they replace orthography with typography instead of making pauses with commas, dots, and exclamation points or initial capitals. Poets use negative space, kerning, type, line breaks, or visual hierarchy to emphasize parts of the poem and to create a set of rhythm or structure, verbal composition with visual means. I mean, I'm also actually very interested here as well, not only in, classical examples, but the daily practices, how poets or again, actually in these examples, I think half of them are renowned Estonian poets who post their poets like this, and half of them are just random, I guess, poetry blogs or something like this. But as a side note, I haven't written it down here, but I have this theory maybe for another paper that I think social media is actually making poetry become much more visual than it has been in the previous times. So, while orthographically these might seem rule violations, for poetry, these means are more effective and more suitable for structuring and communicating meaning. In both of these examples, typesetting and poetry, we could say that a certain rule is violent. And this concludes that a rule should never be seen as an end in itself, but only as a means to achieve a certain goal. So in that sense, why worry about the rule violation is the goal the goal or the function for which the rule was set up in the first place. In our case, legibility is achieved, but just by our means. As a final thought, I think the idea of rules and how we relate to them in actual design practices has interesting connotations to one of the core concepts of design, which is functionality. Rules are often seen as the defenders or preservers of functionality, or in other words, each violation of that typographic rule comes with the cost of functionality. But here I would suggest the same approach, that we should not start from definitions of functionality, which are often vague, as vague as the famous and often also shared in social media Donald Judd quote, "Design has to work, art does not," but instead we should start with practice. We should take a look at how designers work and make conclusions from there. And this is meant in the spirit of late Wittgenstein and his concept of meaning as use, which he elaborated in his philosophical investigations. He showed that to understand the meaning of a word or a sentence, we should not look into dictionaries which define the meaning of a word, but that we should analyze the particular situations when and how the word is used. He also talked a lot about rules and rule following and shows how the interpretation of a simple rule can vary very much in a certain context when it is used. In that sense, we might say that in speech, pre-given rules are constantly broken to preserve the flow of communication, or rather, that the rules are constantly reinvented while speaking. And to translate Wittgenstein's meaning as use into design context, I would propose that we should start speaking about function as use. And in that sense, we could say that whatever we do with typography can be seen as functional if we understand the meanings that a certain typographic act is driven by. So we should put less effort into talking about objective principles of legibility. Instead, we should look into particular cases of typographic acts by designers and evaluate them from the perspective of what that particular act is trying to do. Because rules of legibility are secondary in understanding what a certain typographic act is doing, what it means, what its function is. And maybe also a small side note, I have this idea that we should really talk about typography as a verb. That's why I'm also stressing the idea of that we're talking about typographic acts, because this immediately brings in intention and someone doing it. So we cannot just judge some kind of artifact of typography in an abstract sense without actual context. When designers are working with typography, then we have rules and conventions in mind. But those should never be treated as ends in themselves, but as means to reach certain goals. We might say that anything goes here as well, as it often might be more practical, functional, to break a rule than follow it blindly. And we might say that by breaking the rules, designers are doing the wrong thing for the right reason, because although they're breaking a rule, they are in accord with the reasons why a certain rule was established in the first place. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yes. Yeah. Actually, I'd like to ask something like I'm curious how far we can go in justifying the breaking of rules or making mistakes. For example, in your summary, there was an orthographic mistake in the word orthography, which is quite.
What's that? I think that's.
But we all thought that was
like the message was conveyed anyway. So, is this justifiable, or how can we? What kind of?
Well, no, that's kind of a grammar mistake, I would say, not like a violation of the rule of typography.
So that's fine.
Sorry?
So that's fine, or should that be?
Well, I don't really care about how far we should go. All I'm saying in a way that we should exactly look at the actual situation, why it was done. And here, we can quickly solve this question by saying, well, this was just a mistake, I didn't notice it. So there's no judgment over it in that sense, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. And when you're talking about the Facebook post and the critique in the comments and that kind of on the side of pictualism, if people are critiquing it, do you think there's a line between almost genuine critique and people coming from a place of snobbery and where that line's kind of drawn in design?
But how do you mean? Do you mean that what the people who are commenting? Or it's not?
I mean, when someone's critiquing something,
or do you guidance on?
Critiquing. I mean, it's like side where people sit when critiquing design, the people critique, they are well within their rights to do that, but at the same time.
No. I mean, I think I also don't know, but it's a very good. I mean, in some sense, it's. I have thought a lot about it, and maybe that's. I mean, actually, all these ideas have come out of this. That I have seen these discussions in social media, and also maybe because something is quite small, so there's one group everyone is there discussing, and also very often, words from the culture field, so to speak, or everything's personal. I mean, I'm the head of design department, and our departments or our students' work is often criticized there because it's artsy or something like this. So I am somehow reflecting on it a lot. What's how people talk there, and I think a big part of it definitely is this: you post something like this, or actually something like this, and then everyone in the group immediately understand that this is wrong. and they put a like, but no one is actually having a discussion about this design. And, and for me, actually, these, I can clearly I can name the rules that they're breaking here, or in that sense, let's say the mistakes that they're making. But at the same time, formally they look very cool, actually. So, that's maybe, where the ideas come from is this lack of understanding that context. And, probably random answer, I would say, but,
Yes.
Boy, don't you think that this whole Facebook discussion, that's not an appeal to rules? If you would enter that conversation and say, I checked in Yosuke's manual and I can inform the group that this is the way to do it, you wouldn't win.
I never engage in them, to ask me. But also, I think what happens is this, that design rules are, for instance, that come up in first, Googling, are very simple. Everyone can understand them. So it's almost something like, you post, something where something starts occurring, and immediately everyone is, yes, I know that, that rule, so it must be that. So it's kind of this it creates this a herd mentality, I would think, that everyone quickly, agrees. But at the same time, have you read a little bit of Wittgenstein and stuff like this? You understand that, the reality is, application of these rules is very complex, and there's so much space around it. And actually, we don't even have to talk about these philosophy dudes. We all know this from our own practices from designers. We are, you don't really care about the ruling. You just want to do a nice layout or that kind of layout that you want. Sometimes things have to be all over the place. So you just need to find ways to make it work. So in that sense, yes.
Does that then start to bring in a bit of a question of class or hierarchy, that because if you have a certain level of critical approval within your discipline, then you can make actively break these rules, and everybody says, well, okay, but you can do that because you clearly have defined yourself successfully in this other arena. And so I feel it's it's class and privilege and all of these sorts of things, but also just within the discipline of this idea of gaining knowledge. If you go to a particular program and you know that you will learn X, Y, and Z, and you kind of jump those hurdles or whatever, and then you're able to really transcend that in a way that is successful, that then might not garner the same kind of mockery that is happening here, which is also just a validation of acknowledgement of having done a certain course of study or gone through these hurdles or something.
Well, there's definitely this in there, but actually, I personally don't think that. That's what I was trying to say as well. That there are designers, who break these rules consciously and somehow very cleverly in a way. But I think that the everyday practice of these designers actually who make things posts, that they themselves as well actually constantly breaking these rules.
I guess what I mean is not so much about it's a bit death of the author. It's not so much I have chosen to do this. It's more about the reception of the work critically in the world, where it's you made the work, you've broken the rule, whatever. And now you're sending your design out into the world. And it's more about, I guess what I'm saying is more about the reception of this work circulating in these spheres outside of its necessary association, directly attached to I did not Curtis or I did not whatever, that might be. That is maybe something kind of interesting to think about.
That's what I mean. I'm thinking that, these very designers who are very well educated, but make bad design, so to speak, on purpose, they're also mocked in these communities together with, so basically that, aesthetic logo and these are put in the same category. I don't know if this somehow relates to what you're talking about, or
Could you translate what the comments are on those? Because I can't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
I can't see anything wrong with it. Well, it's 35 of each.
Yeah. No, I mean, here just someone.
I mean, I get the IJ.
Well, I mean, they talk about like, first of all, actually, there are several comments by people who know Dutch, and then they say that, well, INJ are actually saying around, so it's fine. But of course, nobody really reads the comments; they just post it again. And then, but there are also, I mean, it goes a little out of hand. There are several comments where Dutch design, of course, is going downfall nowadays, and blah blah. So it's. I mean, they very quickly snowball out of perspective. So it's yeah, I don't know. But I mean, for me, it's somehow fascinating that the comments are the same here and here. I mean, maybe it's not actually that interesting because that's what happens in social media. Like the work always becomes formal. There's no initial context there. So yeah, and even if people know that this is done by a famous designer, or they know that it's probably not a random hair salon, so it looks like a important building, even if you don't know nothing about it itself, then, this basically ad hoc explanations come in that, yes, but Dutch design is bad nowadays anyway, and, all these things.
This is just a brilliant example then of what Ella's saying, because it aggravates everyone equally. That anyone can hate it on Facebook, but also, serious design commentary was really criticizing the stupidity of this. That's really good. Really.
Yeah.
I have two questions.
So that everyone else
I have two questions. They're completely unrelated. One is personal to me because I'm researching beauty and design. So do you think these breaking of rules is more about what is ugly and what is beautiful, or actually breaking the rules of design as it should be?
I think it's, this topic I think is about rules in general. Yeah. But of course, these discussions, I mean, why someone starts commenting, of course, they're like European all the time to say. But again, I don't know. I mean, it's like, this one is clearly kitsch. And kitsch, I think, is all about beauty in a way. Look at the ear, it's beautiful. So in that sense, but none of these things relate to, what the design is trying to do, and it's successful in this, Maybe, we don't know the context. Maybe it was, designed by, actually, I mean, I can see it's a piano concert. So, yeah, maybe 100 people came to this concert, but it was actually a very successful poster in that sense, or ad reports.
Yeah. My other question was about that we were mentioning different breaks and dashes and all that. Do you think it is also this mess that's created by every single language uses differently? Do you think it's also caused by the fact that there's so much internationalization and globalization these days? It's like you sometimes get mixed up. I mean, English isn't my first language, but I notice myself using English orthography in my native language and vice versa. So what's your thought on this?
First of all, I have the same. It's clear that when I said that somehow I think that the English fonts are better or more beautiful or whatever, it's not like some kind of objective truth. It's clearly a fact that I have colonized my mind with the English language by reading it a lot, and I also, most of the books that I design are in English, so somehow, I guess I'm just used to it in a way. But on another note, I would say that, I don't know. I don't really see the problem that we have so many different rules. Just the same thing that I said to students. Just be consistent in doing one project and as it's probably already clear, I don't really care, that much what the rules per se, more like that the communication is what happens. So if you use, a certain type of quotation marks or dashes, and it doesn't somehow mess up the legibility or the design or whatever, then it's complete.
As long as it just transfers that.
As long as it works.
As long as it works.
Yeah.
I guess that's it for today. Oh, there's one more question.
Can I ask you to go to the slide with the Google, where you Google the rules? Now, I just think that these are not rules, but I think that I'm curious what you think. That I think that these are the principles.
Yeah.
The second part of the presentation was about rules. I just wonder what it means for what you were saying. Because I think that there are no current rules, to my knowledge, but rather principles that we follow in these specific cases. And you cannot really say that it's bad or good because it's really depending on that specific case. But in that case of the, when you talk about the M-dash, I think there should be no space because that's a rule, I think, in a set of languages, for instance, in English. So I just wonder what it means for what you were saying about rules, because I think that these are not really rules,
Maybe actually it's very good because I haven't really thought of it in that sense, and I don't really have an answer for this. So, great. I guess that's what it is. So, yeah. I mean, Google says that it's rules, so. But I'm sure maybe if I would have Googled the typography principles, maybe it would have been the same thing. So. But yeah.
Thank you so much. That's nice.